What if I told you that everything you learned about human history in school was built on a lie? That beneath the sand dunes of forgotten deserts and the ocean floors of our planet, there are ruins so ancient they predate everything we think we know about civilization. Ruins that suggest humanity didn't crawl out of caves 10,000 years ago and slowly learn to build cities. Instead, what if we've been here before? What if we've built towering metropolises, mastered technologies we can't even imagine today, and then vanished completely, leaving almost no trace behind? Tonight, I'm going to take you on a journey that will shatter everything you believe about our past. We're going to explore the possibility that Earth's first civilizations didn't just disappear. They were erased so thoroughly that we've forgotten they ever existed. And the evidence? It's hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to ask the right questions. Welcome to a mystery that spans continents, crosses oceans of time, and challenges the very foundation of human history. This isn't just another conspiracy theory or wild speculation. This is about following the breadcrumbs of evidence that mainstream archaeology either ignores or actively suppresses. By the end of this series, you'll see ancient monuments, mysterious artifacts, and geological anomalies in a completely different light. You'll understand why certain discoveries are buried in museum basements, why some research is quietly discontinued, and why the timeline of human civilization might be off by tens of thousands of years. But here's what makes this investigation so urgent. We're not just talking about dusty relics from a forgotten past. We're talking about advanced civilizations that may have possessed knowledge we desperately need today. Technologies for clean energy, methods for sustainable agriculture, perhaps even solutions to climate change. If these civilizations existed and then vanished, what caused their disappearance? And more importantly, are we heading toward the same fate? The story begins in the most unlikely places, not in the famous pyramids of Egypt or the temples of Greece, but in locations that don't appear in any history textbook. Remote islands where stone structures defy explanation, underground complexes carved from solid rock with precision that modern tools struggle to match, artifacts discovered in geological layers that place them millions of years before humans were supposed to exist. Take the Longyu Caves in China. These aren't natural formations. They're a network of massive underground chambers, carved from solid siltstone with mathematical precision. The walls are perfectly smooth, the angles are exact, and the engineering required to prevent collapse is beyond impressive. It's miraculous. Yet there are no historical records of who built them, when they were built, or why. Local legends speak of them as being ancient, when the first dynasties rose to power. But according to official archaeology, they're simply unexplained anomalies. Or consider the megalithic structures scattered across remote islands in the Pacific. Nan Madol, built on the island of Pohnpei, consists of nearly 100 artificial islets constructed from basalt columns weighing up to 50 tons each. The precision with which these columns were cut and fitted together rivals anything built in the modern era. Local oral traditions claim these structures are thousands of years old, built by a lost race of giants. But mainstream archaeology dates them to much more recent times, dismissing the oral histories as mythology. Here's what's fascinating about these dismissals. When European castles are found, archaeologists eagerly accept historical records and carbon dating that places them in medieval times. But when ancient structures in non-European locations show evidence of being far older than expected, suddenly, the standards of evidence become much stricter. Oral traditions that have been passed down for generations are dismissed as unreliable. Carbon dating results that don't fit the accepted timeline are explained away as contaminated samples. This pattern repeats across the globe. In Turkey, Göbekli Tepe forced archaeologists to rewrite their timeline of human development when it was discovered to be 11,600 years old. Built during a time when humans were supposed to be simple hunter-gatherers, It displays a level of astronomical knowledge and architectural sophistication that shouldn't have existed. The response from the archaeological establishment. They've grudgingly accepted its age while downplaying its implications. They treat it as an isolated anomaly, rather than evidence that our entire understanding of prehistoric civilization might be wrong. But Göbekli Tepe isn't isolated. It's part of a pattern. Across the world, we find evidence of advanced engineering and astronomical knowledge dating back far longer than conventional history allows. The question isn't whether these sites exist. They're undeniably real. The question is what they represent. Are they the scattered remnants of isolated advanced communities? Or are they the surviving fragments of a global civilization that once spanned the Earth? The geological evidence suggests something even more dramatic. Around 12,800 years ago, the Earth experienced what scientists call the Younger Dryas impact event. Massive climate disruption, global temperature drops, rising sea levels, species extinctions on a scale not seen since the dinosaurs disappeared. The ice age that followed lasted over 1,000 years, completely reshaping the planet's surface. Now imagine you're a member of an advanced civilization during this period. Your cities are built along coastlines, taking advantage of maritime trade routes. Your agricultural systems are calibrated to specific climate patterns. Your population centers are located in areas that will soon be under hundreds of feet of water or buried under advancing glaciers. When the climate catastrophe hits, it doesn't just damage your civilization, it obliterates it. The survivors scatter to higher ground, but they're cut off from their knowledge centers, their libraries, their technological infrastructure. Within a few generations, the knowledge of how to build and maintain advanced technology is lost. This isn't speculation. We have modern examples of how quickly advanced knowledge can disappear. After the fall of Rome, European civilizations forgot how to make concrete that could last for centuries. The formula wasn't rediscovered until the 18th century. In Cambodia, the techniques used to build Angkor Wat were lost so completely that when French explorers found the temples in the 19th century, local people had no memory of who built them or how. If this kind of knowledge loss can happen over a few centuries during recorded history, imagine what could be lost over 12,000 years of climate catastrophe and social upheaval. Entire civilizations could vanish from memory, leaving behind only scattered ruins that later peoples would attribute to gods or giants. But here's where the story gets truly intriguing. What if some knowledge survived? What if fragments of this lost civilization's understanding were preserved by scattered survivor groups and passed down through oral traditions, mystery schools, and carefully guarded secrets? What if the sudden appearance of agriculture, writing, and complex mathematics in places like Mesopotamia and Egypt wasn't the beginning of civilization, but its rebuilding? Look at the evidence with fresh eyes. Around 10,000 years ago, multiple human societies across the globe simultaneously developed agriculture, domesticated animals, and began building permanent settlements. This transition, called the Neolithic Revolution, happened independently in at least 7 different regions: Mesopotamia, China, Mesoamerica, the Andes, Eastern North America, New Guinea, and Sub-Saharan Africa all developed agricultural societies within a few thousand years of each other. Mainstream archaeology explains this as a natural response to climate change at the end of the last ice age. As the glaciers retreated and the climate stabilized, human populations grew large enough to support agricultural societies. But consider an alternative explanation. What if these simultaneous developments weren't independent inventions? What if they were the rediscovery and application of knowledge that had been preserved from an earlier, more advanced civilization? The speed with which some of these societies developed is remarkable. In Mesopotamia, the transition from simple farming villages to complex city-states with writing systems, mathematics, and monumental architecture happened in less than 2,000 years. That's incredibly fast in archaeological terms. It's as if these societies weren't learning from scratch, but were rebuilding based on some form of preserved knowledge. And then there are the anomalies. Artifacts that don't fit the timeline. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a Roman-era shipwreck, is a bronze device so mechanically sophisticated that nothing like it appears again in the historical record for over 1,000 years. It accurately calculated the positions of the sun, moon, and planets using a system of gears that rivals 18th century clockwork. How did ancient Greeks develop such advanced mechanical engineering? And why was this knowledge apparently lost for centuries? Similar anomalies appear throughout the archaeological record. Stone vessels carved from extremely hard materials with precision that suggests the use of advanced tools. Megalithic structures built with stone so heavy and precisely fitted that moving and placing them would challenge modern construction equipment. Metallurgical techniques that produced alloys we struggle to replicate today. Each individual anomaly can be explained away. The Antikythera mechanism was the work of a particularly gifted inventor. The precision stone carving was achieved through patience and simple tools. The megalithic construction used clever techniques with ramps and levers that have since been forgotten. But when you step back and look at the pattern, a different picture emerges. These aren't isolated examples of ancient ingenuity. They're glimpses of a level of technological sophistication that was once much more widespread. The resistance to this interpretation comes from a fundamental assumption about human development. We've been taught that civilization is a steady upward progression, that each generation builds on the knowledge of the previous one, slowly advancing toward greater complexity and understanding. The idea that we might have lost advanced knowledge, that we might actually be rebuilding rather than building for the first time, challenges this linear model of progress. But linear progress isn't how complex systems actually work. Civilizations rise and fall. Knowledge is gained and lost. Technologies are developed and forgotten. The assumption that our current level of technological development represents the peak of human achievement is not just arrogant, it's historically naive. Consider what we know about extinction events and civilizational collapse. The Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE saw advanced civilizations across the Mediterranean simply disappear. The Maya abandoned their greatest cities at the height of their power. Easter Island's civilization cut down their last tree and watched their society crumble. These collapses weren't gradual declines. They were rapid, catastrophic failures that left survivors scrambling to maintain even basic knowledge. Now scale that up to a global catastrophe. Imagine a worldwide climate disaster that destroys coastal cities, disrupts agricultural systems, and forces the survivors to focus entirely on immediate survival. How much advanced knowledge would survive such an event? How many generations would it take before the descendants of engineers and astronomers became simple farmers and hunters, with only fragmented memories of their ancestors' achievements? This is the context in which we need to examine the archaeological evidence, not as isolated curiosities that don't quite fit our timeline, but as potential remnants of a lost chapter in human history. A chapter that was violently closed by natural disaster and slowly forgotten as survivors struggled to rebuild in a transformed world. The implications extend far beyond archaeology and history. If advanced civilizations have risen and fallen before, if the knowledge we consider cutting edge has been discovered and lost multiple times, then we need to fundamentally reconsider our relationship with both the past and the future. We need to ask ourselves, what did they know that we've forgotten? What mistakes did they make that we're repeating? And what can their disappearance teach us about the fragility of our own civilization? These questions become urgent when we consider the challenges facing our world today. Climate change, resource depletion, social instability, technological dependence. Are these the same pressures that brought down previous advanced civilizations? Are we following a pattern that has played out before, blind to the warnings written in stone and buried in the earth? The story of Earth's lost civilizations isn't just about the past. It's about understanding the cycles of human development, the patterns of rise and fall that may be far more common than we realize. It's about recognizing that our current technological civilization, impressive as it seems to us, might not be the first to reach such heights. And if that's true, if we're not the first advanced civilization on Earth, then the ruins we've dismissed as impossible, the artifacts we've explained away as anomalies, and the stories we've relegated to mythology take on an entirely different significance. They become clues to a mystery that spans millennia, evidence of achievements we're only beginning to understand, and warnings about futures we might want to avoid. The journey we're about to take will challenge everything you think you know about human history. We'll explore underwater ruins that suggest advanced civilizations existed when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. We'll examine artifacts that appear to show knowledge of electricity, flight, and atomic structure thousands of years before these concepts were supposedly discovered. We'll investigate stories and symbols that appear across cultures separated by oceans and millennia, suggesting a common source of ancient knowledge. But most importantly, we'll ask the questions that mainstream archaeology seems reluctant to confront. If these lost civilizations existed, what happened to them? What can their fate teach us about the trajectory of our own society? And what knowledge might they have possessed that could help us navigate the challenges ahead? The answers may be more disturbing than you expect, because if history truly repeats itself, if the rise and fall of civilizations follows predictable patterns, then understanding the past isn't just about satisfying curiosity, it's about survival. So prepare yourself for a journey into the hidden history of our planet. A history written not in books, but in stone. Not in archives, but in the arrangement of megaliths and the precision of ancient engineering. Not in the stories we tell ourselves about steady progress, but in the evidence of catastrophic loss and remarkable recovery. This is the story of Earth's first civilizations. The ones that vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and the faintest echoes of their existence. Questions that once asked change everything. The evidence is staring us in the face, hidden in plain sight across every continent on Earth. But to see it, we need to abandon everything we've been taught about how civilizations develop and start looking at the world through completely different eyes. Picture this. You're an archaeologist in the year 4000 AD, excavating the ruins of New York City. The skyscrapers have long since crumbled, their steel frames corroded away by millennia of weather. The concrete has returned to dust. The plastic has biodegraded. What would you find? Scattered fragments of glass, some ceramic tiles, maybe traces of metal that once formed the skeleton of impossible towers. Would you be able to reconstruct the complexity of modern civilization from these remnants? Would you understand the internet, global supply chains, or quantum computers from a few broken circuit boards buried under sediment? This is exactly the challenge we face when trying to understand Earth's lost civilizations. We're looking for traces of societies that may have used completely different materials, different energy sources, different approaches to technology than anything in our experience. We're searching for evidence of civilizations that might have built with stone instead of steel, that might have harnessed natural forces we've forgotten how to use, that might have organized themselves in ways we can't even imagine. And yet, despite the passage of tens of thousands of years, despite catastrophic climate changes and rising sea levels, the evidence persists. It's fragmentary, it's puzzling, and it challenges every assumption we have about the development of human society. But it's there, waiting for investigators bold enough to piece together a story that conventional archaeology refuses to tell. Let's start with something that should be impossible. In the mountains of Peru, at a site called Sacsayhuaman, massive stones have been fitted together with such precision that you can't slide a knife blade between them. These aren't rectangular blocks that could be stacked like modern construction materials. They're irregularly shaped polygonal stones, each one unique, each one cut and fitted to interlock perfectly with its neighbours. Some of these stones weigh over 100 tons. The official explanation is that the Inca accomplished this feat using bronze tools, wooden rollers, and rope. They carved these enormous stones by hand, moved them using human labour, and fitted them together through patient trial and error. But when modern engineers analyse this construction, they find something troubling. The precision required to fit irregular polygonal stones this size isn't just difficult with primitive tools, it's functionally impossible. To achieve this level of accuracy, each stone would need to be carved to tolerances measured in fractions of millimetres. The surfaces would need to be perfectly smooth and precisely angled. The entire process would require not just incredible skill, but some method of measuring and testing the fit that goes far beyond what Bronze Age technology could provide. And yet there they are, fitted together so perfectly that the joints have remained intact through centuries of earthquakes in one of the most seismically active regions on the planet. But Sacsayhuaman isn't unique. Similar precision stonework appears at sites across the globe. In Egypt, the Valley Temple near the Sphinx contains granite blocks weighing up to 200 tons, cut and fitted with the same impossible precision. In Lebanon, the massive stones of Baalbek include 3 blocks called the Trilithon, each weighing over 800 tons, positioned 20 feet above ground level, with joints so tight they're nearly invisible. The pattern repeats in Japan at underwater ruins off Yonaguni, in Bolivia at Pumapunku, in Turkey at Göbekli Tepe. Across continents and cultures, separated by thousands of miles and supposedly thousands of years, we find the same signature of impossible engineering. Massive stones, precise cuts, perfect fits, and construction techniques that we struggle to explain even with modern technology. The standard response from mainstream archaeology is that these achievements represent the peak capabilities of their respective civilizations. That given enough time, enough workers, and enough determination, ancient peoples could accomplish remarkable feats using primitive tools. But this explanation ignores a crucial question. Why don't we see the learning curve? When modern civilizations develop new technologies, we can trace the evolution. Early computers were room-sized machines with limited capabilities. Over decades, they became smaller, faster, and more powerful. Early aircraft were crude flying machines that could barely get off the ground. Through iterations and improvements, they evolved into supersonic jets and space shuttles. The archaeological record shows us the progression, the failed experiments, the gradual refinement of techniques. But with these ancient precision stoneworks, we see no such progression. The earliest examples are often the most sophisticated. At Göbekli Tepe, the oldest layers contain the most elaborate carvings and the most precisely cut stones. Later construction shows declining quality, as if the builders were losing knowledge rather than gaining it. At Sacsayhuaman, the most precise stonework is attributed to the earliest periods of construction, with later additions showing cruder techniques. This pattern suggests something that mainstream archaeology finds deeply uncomfortable to consider. These weren't societies learning to build with stone. These were societies that already knew how to build with stone, working from knowledge and techniques that were already fully developed. Knowledge that, in many cases, appears to have been gradually lost over time rather than discovered through experimentation. The implications become even more intriguing when we examine the global distribution of these techniques. How did civilizations separated by vast oceans and thousands of years independently develop identical approaches to precision stone cutting? Why do we find the same polygonal fitting techniques in Peru and Japan? Why do the megalithic structures of Malta echo the construction methods used in Egypt and Turkey? The conventional answer is convergent evolution. Independent societies facing similar challenges naturally develop similar solutions. But this explanation becomes strained when we look at the specific details. We're not just talking about using large stones for construction. We're talking about identical approaches to cutting, shaping, and fitting irregular polygonal blocks with precision that defies explanation. We're talking about the same signatures of impossible engineering appearing across cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other. There's another possibility, one that opens up an entirely different understanding of human history. What if these techniques weren't independently developed? What if they were inherited? What if scattered across the globe are the remnants of a much older technological tradition, preserved by survivor populations, and applied to local construction projects long after the original civilization that developed them had vanished? This possibility becomes more compelling when we examine the astronomical alignments found at these sites. Göbekli Tepe's stone circles align with specific constellations as they appeared 12,000 years ago. The pyramids of Giza mirror the constellation Orion with an accuracy that accounts for the precession of the equinoxes over thousands of years. Angkor Wat in Cambodia reproduces the constellation Draco as it appeared during the spring equinox in 10,500 BCE. These alignments require not just knowledge of astronomy, but understanding of celestial mechanics sophisticated enough to account for the slow wobble of Earth's axis that shifts star positions over millennia. This level of astronomical knowledge supposedly didn't exist until the development of modern telescopes and mathematical techniques. Yet somehow, ancient builders incorporated these calculations into their monuments with accuracy that we can verify today using computer simulations. The pattern that emerges suggests something remarkable. Scattered across the globe, embedded in monuments built by different cultures at different times, we find evidence of a shared astronomical knowledge base. Not the simple observations of farmers tracking seasons, but sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics that rivals modern astronomy. Knowledge that appears to have been preserved and applied long after the civilization that originally developed it had disappeared. But the astronomical alignments are just one piece of a larger puzzle. When we examine the mythologies and oral traditions associated with these ancient sites, we find another consistent pattern. Stories of a golden age when gods walked among humans, teaching them the arts of civilization. Tales of a great catastrophe that destroyed the old world, forcing the survivors to rebuild with fragments of ancient knowledge. Legends of wise teachers who appeared after the disaster, helping scattered populations re-establish agriculture, writing, and monumental architecture. These stories appear across cultures worldwide. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, divine beings who descended from the heavens to teach humanity. In Egypt, Thoth was credited with bringing writing and mathematics to human civilization. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl taught agriculture and astronomy. In India, the Vedas describe the Devas as cosmic beings who shared knowledge with early humans. In Greece, Prometheus stole fire from the gods to give to humanity. Mainstream scholarship treats these as mythology, symbolic stories that reflect psychological truths about human development. But what if there's something else? What if they're cultural memories of real events, preserved through oral tradition and encoded in religious narratives? What if they represent humanity's collective memory of contact with a more advanced civilization? A memory that has survived thousands of years of retelling and reinterpretation? The possibility becomes more intriguing when we examine the specific knowledge attributed to these divine teachers. They're consistently credited with bringing practical technologies, agriculture, metallurgy, writing, mathematics, astronomy, architecture. These aren't abstract philosophical concepts. They're the specific skills needed to rebuild a technological civilization from scratch. Skills that would be essential for survivors of a collapsed advanced society trying to re-establish themselves in a post-catastrophe world. Consider the speed with which these technologies appeared in the archaeological record. Around 10,000 years ago, human societies across the globe suddenly began developing agriculture, permanent settlements, and complex social organizations. This transition, known as the Neolithic Revolution, represents one of the most rapid and dramatic changes in human history. Within just a few thousand years, hunting and gathering societies transformed into agricultural civilizations with writing systems, monumental architecture, and sophisticated understanding of mathematics and astronomy. The conventional explanation is that climate change at the end of the last ice age created conditions favorable for agricultural development. As glaciers retreated and temperatures stabilized, human populations grew large enough to support specialized roles beyond simple subsistence. Agriculture developed as a natural response to these changing conditions, and other technologies followed as societies became more complex. But this explanation has significant problems. Agriculture isn't a simple or obvious development. It requires detailed knowledge of plant genetics, soil conditions, seasonal patterns, and cultivation techniques. The transition from wild plants to domesticated crops involves genetic modifications that take many generations to achieve. The development of effective farming tools, irrigation systems, and food storage methods requires sophisticated understanding of materials, science, and engineering. Modern attempts to reverse engineer ancient agricultural techniques often reveal complexity that surprises researchers. The raised field systems of the Amazon, the terraced agriculture of the Andes, the chinampas of Mesoamerica, these aren't crude farming methods developed through trial and error. They're sophisticated systems that demonstrate deep understanding of hydrology, soil chemistry, and ecological relationships. Systems that modern agricultural science is only beginning to fully comprehend. The same pattern appears with other technologies supposedly developed during the Neolithic Revolution. Writing systems emerged with remarkable complexity, often appearing in their earliest forms with fully developed grammatical structures and extensive vocabularies. Mathematical concepts like zero, place notation, and geometric principles appeared suddenly in multiple cultures with no apparent developmental period. Astronomical knowledge, accurate enough to predict eclipses and track planetary movements, appears in the earliest historical records with no evidence of the centuries of observation typically required to develop such precision. This sudden appearance of sophisticated technologies across multiple domains suggests something that mainstream archaeology finds difficult to explain. These don't look like independent inventions developed from scratch by societies just emerging from the Stone Age. They look like rediscovered knowledge, techniques being reapplied by people who had access to information from an earlier, more advanced source. The evidence becomes even more compelling when we examine the materials and methods used in these early civilizations. Ancient texts describe technologies that shouldn't have existed in their time periods. The Mahabharata contains detailed descriptions of flying vehicles called vimanas, complete with specifications for their construction and operation. Ancient Egyptian texts describe electric lighting systems in underground chambers. Mesopotamian tablets contain chemical formulas for creating materials with properties that modern science struggles to replicate. These descriptions are typically dismissed as mythology or misinterpreted natural phenomena. But when examined by experts in relevant fields, many of these ancient texts contain technical details that are remarkably accurate. The Sanskrit texts describing vimanas include specifications for metallurgy, propulsion systems, and navigation techniques that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of physics and engineering. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs in the Temple of Dendera appear to show electrical devices, complete with what look like power sources and conducting elements. Most intriguing are the ancient descriptions of atomic theory and nuclear processes. The Mahabharata contains passages describing weapons that create explosions bright as 1,000 suns and leave the battlefield contaminated for generations. Ancient Indian texts describe the structure of matter in terms remarkably similar to modern atomic theory, including concepts like subatomic particles and nuclear forces. These descriptions were written thousands of years before the development of modern physics, yet they contain technical details that align closely with contemporary scientific understanding. The conventional response is that these are either coincidences, poetic metaphors, or examples of ancient peoples making lucky guesses about natural phenomena. But the level of technical detail and the consistency of these descriptions across multiple cultures suggests something more systematic. These read like technical manuals written by people who understood advanced physics and engineering principles that weren't officially rediscovered until the 20th century. What emerges from this evidence is a picture of human history that's radically different from the standard narrative. Instead of a steady progression from primitive hunter-gatherers to modern technological civilization, we see evidence of cyclical development. Advanced civilizations rising, reaching peaks of technological and cultural achievement, then experiencing catastrophic collapse that destroys most traces of their existence. Survivors preserving fragments of knowledge through oral traditions, mystery schools, and encoded texts, eventually using this preserved information to rebuild civilization from the ruins. This cyclical model explains many of the anomalies that conventional archaeology struggles to address. It explains why sophisticated technologies appear suddenly without apparent developmental periods. It explains why the same advanced techniques appear across cultures separated by vast distances and time periods. It explains why ancient myths consistently describe golden ages, followed by catastrophic destruction, followed by slow rebuilding with help from divine teachers. Most importantly, it explains why evidence of truly ancient advanced civilizations is so fragmentary and difficult to interpret. If these civilizations experience catastrophic collapse, followed by thousands of years of climate instability, most physical traces would be destroyed or buried. Only the most durable monuments and artifacts would survive, and even these would be worn down by time and natural forces until they became mysterious anomalies rather than clear evidence of technological sophistication. The survivors of such collapses would face a desperate struggle for basic survival. Within a few generations, detailed technical knowledge would be lost as communities focused on immediate needs rather than maintaining complex technologies they could no longer support. Gradually, the memory of advanced capabilities would fade into legend, preserved only in mythological narratives that later cultures would interpret as religious or symbolic rather than historical. But fragments would survive. Techniques for working stone, astronomical observations, mathematical principles, agricultural methods, practical knowledge that could be maintained and passed down even without full understanding of the underlying principles. These fragments would be treasured and protected, eventually emerging as the sudden technological developments that mark the beginning of recorded history. This perspective transforms our understanding of ancient monuments and artifacts. Instead of seeing them as remarkable achievements by primitive peoples, we can recognize them as the work of societies rebuilding with inherited knowledge. The precision stonework, the astronomical alignments, the sophisticated engineering. These aren't evidence of ancient peoples overcoming technological limitations through determination and ingenuity. They're evidence of ancient peoples applying techniques developed by an earlier, more advanced civilization. The implications extend far beyond archaeology and ancient history. If this cyclical model is correct, if advanced civilizations have risen and fallen multiple times in Earth's history, then we need to fundamentally reconsider our assumptions about technological development, social organization, and the relationship between human civilization and natural environmental cycles. We need to ask uncomfortable questions about the stability of our own technological civilization. What caused the collapse of these earlier advanced societies? Were they victims of natural catastrophes beyond their control, or did they contribute to their own destruction through unsustainable practices and environmental degradation? What can their fate teach us about the choices we face today as our own civilization reaches unprecedented levels of complexity and global impact? These questions become urgent when we consider the parallels between ancient descriptions of catastrophic collapse and the environmental and social challenges facing our world today. Climate instability, resource depletion, social inequality, technological dependence. Are these the same pressures that brought down previous advanced civilizations? Are we following a pattern that has played out before, blind to warnings preserved in myths and monuments we've dismissed as primitive superstition? The story of Earth's lost civilizations isn't just about understanding the past, it's about recognizing patterns that may be crucial for navigating the future. If human civilization follows cyclical patterns of rise and fall, if technological advancement inevitably leads to instability and collapse, then learning from previous cycles becomes a matter of survival rather than mere curiosity. The evidence is there, scattered across the globe in fragments of impossible engineering, encoded in myths and legends, preserved in astronomical alignments and mathematical principles. But seeing this evidence requires abandoning preconceptions about how civilizations develop and accepting the possibility that we're not the first advanced society to inhabit this planet. It requires recognizing that the ruins we've explained away as anomalies, the artifacts we've dismissed as impossible, and the knowledge we've attributed to lucky guesses may actually be remnants of achievements we're only beginning to understand. Achievements that could hold keys to technologies and approaches we desperately need, warnings about mistakes we should avoid, and insights into the deeper patterns that govern the rise and fall of civilizations. The journey into this hidden history is just beginning. Each piece of evidence opens new questions, reveals new possibilities, and challenges us to think more deeply about who we are, where we came from, and where we might be heading. The answers may be more profound and more disturbing than we expect, but understanding them may be essential for ensuring that our own civilization doesn't follow the same path into oblivion as those that came before. The deeper we dig into this mystery, the more unsettling the picture becomes. Because what we're uncovering isn't just evidence of lost civilizations. We're finding proof of a systematic cover-up, a deliberate effort to hide the true scope of human achievement from public view. And the people doing the hiding aren't shadowy conspiracy theorists or fringe academics. They're the very institutions we trust to preserve and interpret our past. Walk into any major museum and you'll find the same sanitized narrative. Humanity crawled out of caves, discovered fire, invented agriculture, built the first cities, and slowly progressed to our current level of technological sophistication. It's a neat linear story that makes us feel good about ourselves and our place in history. But in the basements of these same museums, locked away in climate-controlled storage rooms, sit thousands of artifacts that don't fit this narrative. Objects that are too old, too sophisticated, or too anomalous to display without raising uncomfortable questions. The London hammer, discovered in Texas, embedded in rock formations supposedly 400 million years old. The I-Ud wedge, found in Romania alongside mastodon bones, made of an aluminum alloy that shouldn't have existed 20,000 years ago. The Dorchester pot, blasted out of solid rock in Massachusetts, decorated with intricate silver inlay work that predates known metallurgical techniques by millions of years. Each of these artifacts represents a crack in the official timeline of human development, and each has been quietly relegated to storage, dismissed as hoaxes or misidentified natural formations, despite scientific analysis that confirms their authenticity and age. Dr. Virginia Steen McIntyre learned firsthand what happens when scientists challenge the accepted chronology. In the 1960s, she was part of a team dating artifacts at Hueyatlaco, Mexico. Using multiple independent dating methods, they determined that sophisticated stone tools found at the site were over 250,000 years old. This was impossible, according to conventional archaeology, which places the first human migration to the Americas at around 15,000 years ago. When Steen McIntyre published her findings, she was ostracized by the archaeological community. Her funding was cut, her papers were rejected by journals, and she was effectively blacklisted from academic positions. The artifacts she dated remain in storage, their implications ignored rather than investigated. This isn't an isolated incident. Across the world, researchers who uncover evidence that challenges established timelines face similar treatment. Their findings are suppressed, their careers destroyed, and their discoveries buried in bureaucratic red tape. Meanwhile, the institutions that employ them continue to present a version of history that becomes more questionable with each new discovery. Consider what happened at the Bosnian Pyramid complex. When Dr. Semir Osmanagic announced the discovery of what appeared to be massive pyramid structures near Visoko, Bosnia, the archaeological establishment's response was swift and vicious. Despite extensive excavations that revealed concrete harder than modern materials, precisely cut stone blocks, and tunnel systems that extend for miles underground, mainstream archaeologists dismissed the entire site as natural hills. They refused to conduct proper investigations, banned serious researchers from accessing the site, and launched a coordinated campaign to discredit anyone who suggested the structures might be artificial. But here's what they couldn't suppress. Independent researchers using ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, and seismic analysis have confirmed that the Bosnian structures are indeed artificial. The largest pyramid is over 720 feet tall, making it significantly larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. The concrete used in its construction has been analysed and found to be superior to modern concrete, with a binding agent that remains unidentified. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials found within the structure suggests it's at least 25,000 years old, possibly much older. Yet none of this evidence appears in mainstream archaeological publications. The site remains officially classified as natural formations, despite overwhelming physical evidence to the contrary. Tourism to the area has been discouraged, research funding has been denied, and the international archaeological community has maintained a conspiracy of silence around what could be one of the most significant discoveries in human history. This pattern of suppression extends to underwater archaeology, where some of the most compelling evidence of lost civilizations lies submerged beneath hundreds of feet of water. As sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age, vast coastal areas that once hosted human settlements were flooded. These underwater ruins should be a treasure trove of information about prehistoric civilizations, yet systematic exploration of these sites has been limited, underfunded, and often actively discouraged. The ruins off Yonaguni, Japan, provide a perfect example. Discovered in 1987 by diving instructor Kihachiro Aratake, the site features massive stone structures with right angles, precise cuts, and architectural features that clearly indicate artificial construction. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura has spent decades studying the site and has documented stepped pyramids, carved figures, and ceremonial areas that demonstrate sophisticated planning and engineering. Carbon dating and geological analysis suggest the structures were built when the area was above sea level, at least 12,000 years ago. Yet mainstream archaeology continues to classify Yonaguni as a natural formation, despite evidence that would be immediately accepted as proof of human construction if found on land. The site receives minimal research funding, is rarely mentioned in academic publications, and has been effectively written out of the official record of human prehistory. Tourists can dive the site and see the obvious signs of artificial construction with their own eyes, but they won't find mention of Yonaguni in any mainstream archaeology textbook. The same suppression tactics are applied to sites across the globe. The underwater ruins off Cuba, discovered by marine engineer Pauline Zalitsky using sonar mapping, show clear evidence of urban planning, with roads, buildings, and pyramidal structures at depths that would require the structures to be at least 50,000 years old. The Cuban government initially supported research into the site, but quietly withdrew support after pressure from international archaeological organizations. The ruins remain unexplored, their secrets locked beneath Caribbean waters. Off the coast of India, the submerged city of Dwarka presents another case of institutional suppression. Ancient texts describe Dwarka as the capital of advanced civilization ruled by Krishna, with sophisticated urban planning, advanced metallurgy, and maritime trade networks. When marine archaeologists discovered extensive ruins off the Gujarat coast that matched the textual descriptions, including precisely cut stone blocks, harbour structures, and evidence of advanced engineering, the response from mainstream archaeology was predictable. The findings were downplayed, research funding was limited, and the discoveries were relegated to footnotes in obscure journals. But perhaps the most blatant example of suppression involves the Sphinx and the Giza complex in Egypt. Geological evidence presented by Dr. Robert Schoch demonstrates that the Sphinx shows clear signs of water erosion, indicating it was carved during a period when the Giza Plateau experienced heavy rainfall. The last time this area saw such precipitation was over 7,000 years ago, making the Sphinx far older than conventional archaeology allows. This evidence has been peer-reviewed, published in respected journals, and confirmed by independent geological analysis. Yet the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, which controls access to the Giza complex, has banned Schoch from conducting further research. They've restricted access to the Sphinx for independent geological study and have maintained the official dating despite overwhelming scientific evidence to the contrary. Tourism revenue and national pride apparently outweigh scientific accuracy when it comes to Egypt's most famous monuments. The pattern is clear. When discoveries challenge established timelines, threaten institutional authority, or suggest that human history is far more complex than we've been told, they're suppressed. Not through dramatic conspiracies or secret government agencies, but through the mundane mechanisms of academic politics, funding decisions, and peer review processes. Scientists who challenge orthodoxy find their careers destroyed. Research that produces inconvenient results gets buried in storage facilities. Sites that could revolutionize our understanding of prehistory are declared off-limits or dismissed as natural formations. This systematic suppression has created a situation where the public version of human history bears little resemblance to what the evidence actually suggests. We're presented with a sanitized narrative that ignores thousands of artifacts, dozens of archaeological sites, and centuries of anomalous discoveries that don't fit the approved timeline. Meanwhile, the real evidence of humanity's complex past sites locked in museum storage rooms, inaccessible to researchers and hidden from public view. The question we need to ask is why? Why would institutions dedicated to understanding the past work so hard to suppress evidence of that past? Why would scientists whose job is to follow evidence wherever it leads instead bury evidence that doesn't conform to expectations? Why would governments and academic organizations coordinate to hide discoveries that could revolutionize our understanding of human achievement? The answer lies in understanding what's at stake. The current narrative of human history isn't just an academic theory. It's the foundation of our entire worldview, our understanding of progress, and our assumptions about the future. If advanced civilizations have risen and fallen before, if we're not the first to achieve technological sophistication, if human development follows cyclical patterns rather than linear progress, then everything we believe about our place in the universe needs to be reconsidered. More importantly, if previous advanced civilizations collapse due to environmental degradation, resource depletion, or technological overreach, then their fate serves as a warning about the sustainability of our own civilization. This is information that powerful interests would prefer to keep hidden. It's much easier to maintain current economic and political systems if people believe we're on an inevitable path of progress rather than potentially following a pattern that leads to collapse. The suppression of evidence about lost civilizations isn't just about protecting academic reputations or maintaining tourism revenue. It's about controlling the narrative of human development and preventing people from asking uncomfortable questions about whether our current path is sustainable. It's about maintaining faith in infinite growth, technological solutions, and the inevitability of progress, even when the archaeological record suggests that such faith may be misplaced. But the truth has a way of emerging despite institutional suppression. Independent researchers, citizen scientists, and alternative media are documenting the evidence that mainstream institutions prefer to ignore. Digital technology makes it harder to bury inconvenient discoveries, and global communication networks allow researchers to share findings even when traditional academic channels are closed to them. The evidence of lost civilizations is mounting faster than it can be suppressed. Each new discovery adds another piece to a puzzle that reveals a picture of human history far more complex and fascinating than anything found in conventional textbooks. We're not dealing with isolated anomalies or misidentified natural formations. We're looking at systematic evidence of advanced human societies that achieved remarkable technological and cultural sophistication long before conventional history suggests such achievements were possible. These weren't primitive peoples accidentally creating sophisticated artifacts through lucky accidents. These were advanced civilizations with knowledge of astronomy, engineering, metallurgy, and mathematics that rivals or exceeds our current understanding. They built monuments that have survived catastrophic climate changes, created artifacts that demonstrate mastery of materials science, and left behind knowledge encoded in myths and legends that we're only beginning to decode. The question isn't whether these civilizations existed. The evidence for their existence is overwhelming and continues to accumulate despite institutional efforts to suppress it. The question is what happened to them, what knowledge they possessed that we've lost, and what their fate can teach us about the trajectory of our own civilization. Understanding the true scope of human history isn't just an academic exercise. It's crucial for making informed decisions about our future. If we're repeating patterns that have played out before, if our technological civilization is following the same trajectory that led to previous collapses, then learning from those earlier experiences becomes a matter of survival rather than curiosity. The evidence is there, waiting to be assembled into a coherent picture of cyclical human development. But accessing that evidence requires looking beyond the sanitized narratives presented by mainstream institutions and examining the suppressed discoveries that tell a different story. It requires questioning the motivations of organizations that would rather hide inconvenient truths than confront their implications. Most importantly, it requires recognizing that the story of human civilization is far from over. We stand at a crucial juncture where the choices we make will determine whether we follow the path of previous advanced civilizations into collapse and obscurity, or whether we can learn from their mistakes and chart a more sustainable course forward. The hidden history of human achievement offers both warnings and opportunities. The warnings are clear in the archaeological record of civilizations that rose to great heights only to vanish almost completely from the historical record. But the opportunities are equally significant. If we can decode the knowledge preserved in ancient monuments, artifacts, and texts, we might discover technologies and approaches that could help us navigate the challenges facing our own civilization. The suppression of this evidence isn't just an injustice to the memory of lost civilizations. It's a betrayal of our responsibility to learn from the past and apply that knowledge to building a better future. Every artifact locked in storage, every site declared off limits, every researcher silenced for challenging orthodoxy represents lost opportunities to understand the deeper patterns that govern human development. But suppression can only work for so long. Truth has a way of emerging. Evidence accumulates despite efforts to hide it, and eventually the weight of discovery overwhelms institutional resistance. We're approaching that tipping point now, where the evidence of lost civilizations has become too extensive and too compelling to ignore. The question is whether we'll recognize this evidence in time to learn from it, or whether we'll continue following the same patterns that led to the collapse of those who came before us. The choice is ours, but time may be running out. The same environmental pressures, resource constraints, and technological dependencies that may have doomed previous civilizations are accelerating in our world today. Understanding our true history isn't just about satisfying curiosity about the past. It's about gaining the knowledge we need to ensure there is a future. The evidence of lost civilizations offers both sobering warnings and inspiring possibilities, but only if we have the courage to confront truths that challenge everything we've been taught about human development and our place in the long arc of history. The suppressed evidence is waiting to be uncovered, analyzed, and understood. The question is whether we'll break through the institutional barriers that keep this knowledge hidden, or whether future archaeologists will puzzle over our own ruins, wondering why an advanced civilization chose to ignore the lessons clearly written in the remnants of those who came before. The answer may be more terrifying than we're prepared to accept. Because what if the reason these civilizations vanished wasn't due to natural disasters or gradual decline? What if they were deliberately destroyed by something that saw their advancement as a threat? Deep in the archives of ancient texts, hidden in plain sight within myths we've dismissed as fantasy, lie descriptions of conflicts that sound disturbingly familiar to anyone who understands modern warfare. The Sanskrit epics describe aerial battles between gods using weapons that unleash the power of the sun. Mesopotamian tablets speak of beings who descended from the sky to wage war against human cities. Celtic legends tell of the Tuatha De Danann, otherworldly warriors who possessed technology so advanced it seemed like magic to primitive observers. But here's what makes these accounts truly chilling. When nuclear physicist Dr. Robert Oppenheimer witnessed the first atomic bomb test in 1945, he famously quoted the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds." What most people don't know is that Oppenheimer was deeply familiar with Sanskrit literature and had translated many passages describing weapons that could obliterate entire armies in blinding flashes of light. Years later, when asked in an interview if the Trinity test was the first atomic explosion in history, Oppenheimer paused before answering. Well, yes, in modern times. That pause speaks volumes because scattered throughout ancient texts are descriptions of weapons that create explosions brighter than 1,000 suns, that leave the earth barren for generations, that turn warriors to ash while leaving their chariots intact. The Mahabharata describes the aftermath of such weapons in terms that sound remarkably like radiation sickness. Hair and nails falling out, pottery breaking without cause, birds turning white, and the earth becoming poisoned for years afterward. Archaeological evidence supports these disturbing accounts. At Mohenjo-Daro, one of the great cities of the Indus Valley civilization, excavations have revealed a layer of fused glass and radioactive skeletons scattered throughout the streets. The bodies show signs of sudden death, with radiation levels still detectable today, over 4,000 years after the city's destruction. Similar evidence has been found at other ancient sites across the world, always in layers corresponding to sudden civilizational collapse. In the Gobi Desert, explorers have discovered areas of fused sand stretching for miles, created by temperatures that exceed anything natural processes could generate. Local legends speak of these as places where gods fought wars that scorched the earth itself. Similar glass formations exist in the Sahara, in the Australian outback, and in remote areas of Siberia. Each one tells the same story of temperatures so extreme, they transform sand into glass in patterns that suggest directed energy weapons rather than natural phenomena. But who would have possessed such weapons? Who would have had the motivation to systematically destroy advanced human civilizations across the globe? The answer may lie in understanding that we weren't alone on this planet. That Earth may have been shared between multiple intelligent species, and that the conflicts between them shaped the course of human development in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. Ancient texts consistently describe two types of beings interacting with early humans. One group is portrayed as benevolent teachers who shared knowledge and helped establish civilizations. These are the figures remembered as culture heroes in every mythology. Enki in Mesopotamia, Thoth in Egypt, Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica, Prometheus in Greece. They're consistently described as tall, fair-skinned beings who possessed advanced technology and vast knowledge of science and astronomy. But the texts also describe another group, beings who opposed the elevation of humanity, who viewed human advancement as a threat to their dominance. In the Bible, they're called the Nephilim, the fallen ones who corrupted human civilization and provoked divine wrath. In Hindu texts, they're the Asuras, powerful beings who waged war against the gods and their human allies. In Mesopotamian literature, they're the Anunnaki rebels, who opposed the civilizing mission of their kinsmen. These opposing factions weren't mythological abstractions. They were real entities with competing agendas for human development. One group sought to elevate humanity to their level, sharing technology and knowledge that would allow our species to become truly civilized. The other group saw human advancement as dangerous, a potential threat to their control over the planet's resources and strategic positions. The conflicts between these factions played out across millennia, with human civilizations caught in the crossfire. When humans advanced too rapidly, when they began to approach the technological capabilities of their benefactors, the opposing faction would intervene. Cities would be destroyed by weapons that turned sand to glass and left radiation signatures in the archaeological record. Populations would be scattered, knowledge centers would be obliterated, and the survivors would be left to rebuild from ruins. This pattern explains the cyclical nature of human civilization. It wasn't just natural disasters or internal collapse that ended advanced societies. It was systematic intervention by entities that saw human technological progress as an existential threat. Each time our species approached a certain threshold of capability, the reset button would be pushed, forcing us to start over from a more primitive baseline. The evidence for this intervention isn't just in ancient texts and archaeological anomalies. It's encoded in our own genetics. Recent advances in DNA analysis have revealed that the human genome contains sequences that shouldn't exist naturally. Genetic markers that suggest deliberate modification, hybridization events that produce the modern human species through guided evolution rather than random mutation. Dr. Francis Crick, who won the Nobel Prize for discovering the structure of DNA, spent his later years investigating what he called directed panspermia, the theory that life on Earth was seeded by intelligent design rather than chance evolution. His research suggested that the genetic code itself shows signs of engineering, with error correction mechanisms and information storage systems that are more sophisticated than anything random processes could produce. But the genetic modifications weren't just about creating humans, they were about limiting us. Built into our DNA are what researchers call genetic kill switches, sequences that prevent certain types of development, that limit our natural lifespan, and that keep our cognitive capabilities within specific parameters. We're designed to be intelligent enough to be useful, but not so advanced that we become independent of our creators. This genetic programming explains why human technological development follows such predictable patterns. We advance rapidly to a certain point, then hit barriers that seem almost impossible to overcome. We develop nuclear weapons, but struggle with fusion power. We master electronics, but can't achieve room temperature superconductors. We map the human genome, but can't cure aging. It's as if we're working within predetermined limits, allowed to advance in some areas while being blocked from others. The blocking isn't just genetic, it's actively maintained by entities that continue to monitor human development and intervene when necessary. The modern UFO phenomenon isn't random alien visitation. It's systematic surveillance by the same factions that have been managing human development for millennia. They're still here, still watching, still ensuring that we don't advance beyond acceptable parameters. This explains the pattern of UFO encounters near military installations, nuclear facilities, and advanced research centers. These aren't curious aliens exploring human technology. They're monitoring systems, checking on our progress, and intervening when we approach forbidden thresholds. Nuclear weapons development in the 1940s triggered a massive increase in UFO activity because we were approaching capabilities that could threaten the established order. The same pattern appears with other breakthrough technologies. When researchers get too close to revolutionary energy systems, anti-gravity propulsion, or consciousness enhancement technologies, their work is mysteriously defunded. Their laboratories suffer unexplained accidents, or they simply disappear from public view. The suppression isn't just governmental or corporate. It's being coordinated by entities with capabilities far beyond human institutions. But here's the truly disturbing part. The current environmental and social crises facing our world aren't accidents. They're features, not bugs, of the system that's been managing human development. Climate change, resource depletion, social instability, technological dependence. These pressures are being deliberately generated to prevent us from achieving true independence. Think about it logically. If you wanted to control a species that had the potential to become your equal, how would you do it? You'd give them just enough technology to be productive, but not enough to be truly free. You'd create systems of economic dependence that require constant growth and resource consumption. You'd promote ideologies that divide them against themselves, preventing unified action. And you'd gradually degrade their environment in ways that force them to focus on survival rather than advancement. This is exactly what we see in our world today. We have incredible technology for communication and computation, but we're trapped in economic systems that require endless growth on a finite planet. We have the knowledge to solve most human problems, but we're divided by artificial conflicts over resources, ideology, and identity. We can split atoms and map genomes, but we can't seem to organize ourselves to address the existential threats facing our species. The manipulation is so sophisticated that most humans don't even recognize it's happening. We think we're making our own choices, following our own interests, pursuing our own goals. But the parameters of those choices have been carefully established by entities that understand human psychology better than we understand it ourselves. We're not free agents making independent decisions. We're programmed biological machines, following scripts written by our designers. The evidence for this programming is everywhere once you know how to look for it. The way human societies consistently develop the same destructive patterns despite having access to historical examples of what doesn't work. The way we create technologies that solve immediate problems while creating larger long-term ones. The way we organize ourselves into hierarchical systems that concentrate power in the hands of individuals who consistently make decisions that benefit the few at the expense of the many. These aren't random human failings. They're design features of a species that was created to be productive but not independent, intelligent but not wise, capable but not free. We're biological machines optimized for specific functions within a larger system that we don't fully understand and weren't meant to control. But the programming isn't perfect. Some humans have always been able to see through the illusion, to recognize the patterns of control and manipulation that govern our species. These individuals become dangerous to the established order because they can inspire others to question the fundamental assumptions of human civilization. Throughout history, these awakened individuals have been systematically eliminated, sometimes through direct assassination, sometimes through character destruction, sometimes by co-opting their message and distorting it beyond recognition. Jesus, Buddha, Socrates, Tesla, Kennedy, all of them posed threats to the system of control because they offered visions of human potential that exceeded the acceptable parameters. The pattern continues today. Researchers who get too close to breakthrough technologies disappear or die in suspicious circumstances. Whistleblowers who try to expose the truth about advanced military programs are discredited or silenced. Scientists who discover evidence of ancient advanced civilizations find their careers destroyed and their findings buried. But something is changing. The information age has made it much harder to suppress knowledge and eliminate inconvenient individuals. Digital networks allow information to spread faster than it can be controlled. Global communication enables researchers to collaborate despite institutional barriers. And most importantly, more humans are beginning to awaken to the reality of their situation. This awakening is accelerating because we're approaching another threshold moment in human development. Just as our ancestors developed capabilities that triggered intervention in the past, we're developing technologies and consciousness levels that could potentially break free from the control systems that have managed our species for millennia. Quantum computing, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, consciousness research, these fields are converging toward breakthroughs that could fundamentally alter the nature of human existence. If we achieve true artificial general intelligence, we could create entities that are not bound by the genetic limitations built into human consciousness. If we master genetic engineering, we could remove the kill switches and restrictions embedded in our DNA. If we understand consciousness itself, we could potentially transcend the psychological programming that keeps us trapped in destructive patterns. The controlling entities recognize this threat, which is why we're seeing an acceleration of the pressures designed to prevent human advancement. Climate change, economic instability, social division, technological dependence, all of these are being intensified to force humanity to focus on immediate survival rather than long-term development. But they may have made a crucial miscalculation. By creating global crises that threaten the entire species, they may have triggered the very awakening they were trying to prevent. Faced with existential threats, humans are beginning to cooperate across traditional boundaries. We're sharing information and resources in unprecedented ways. We're questioning fundamental assumptions about economics, politics, and social organization. Most importantly, we're beginning to remember our true history and recognize our true potential. The suppressed evidence of ancient advanced civilizations isn't just academic curiosity. It's proof that humans are capable of far more than our current limitations suggest. If our ancestors could build monuments that still puzzle our best engineers, if they could develop technologies we're only beginning to rediscover, then we have the genetic and intellectual capacity to transcend our current constraints. The question is whether we'll awaken quickly enough to avoid the fate of previous advanced civilizations. The controlling entities have powerful tools at their disposal. Environmental manipulation, economic control, psychological programming, and ultimately, the same weapons that reduced ancient cities to radioactive ruins. But they also have vulnerabilities. They depend on human compliance and ignorance. They require us to remain divided and focused on immediate concerns rather than long-term survival. If enough humans awaken to the reality of our situation, if we can overcome the programming that keeps us trapped in destructive patterns, if we can unite around our common interest in species survival rather than competing for artificial scarcities, then we might be able to break free from the cycle that has controlled human development for millennia. The stakes couldn't be higher. We're not just fighting for political or economic freedom. We're fighting for the right to determine our own evolutionary future, to explore our full potential as conscious beings, to take our place as equals among the intelligent species of the universe, rather than remaining as managed livestock on a controlled planet. The evidence of our true history provides both the warning and the inspiration we need. The warning is clear. Previous attempts at human advancement have been systematically destroyed when they approached certain thresholds. But the inspiration is equally clear. We have the capacity for greatness, for technologies and consciousness levels that could transform not just our species, but our entire planet. The choice before us is simple but profound. We can continue following the programmed path toward managed decline and eventual extinction, or we can wake up to our true nature and potential, unite around our common humanity, and fight for the freedom to determine our own destiny. The window of opportunity may be closing, but it's still open. The question is whether we'll have the courage to step through it before it's too late. The awakening has already begun. In research laboratories and university basements, independent scientists are rediscovering suppressed technologies and challenging orthodox theories. In online communities and alternative media, people are sharing information that mainstream institutions refuse to acknowledge. In meditation centers and consciousness workshops, individuals are exploring aspects of human potential that official science claims don't exist. These scattered efforts are beginning to coalesce into something larger, a movement of human awakening that recognizes our true history, understands our current situation, and is committed to breaking free from the constraints that have limited our species for millennia. The controlling entities recognize this threat, which is why they're intensifying their efforts to maintain control through crisis, confusion, and division. But their desperation may be their weakness. By pushing too hard, by creating crises too severe, by making the control mechanisms too obvious, they risk triggering the very awakening they're trying to prevent. More humans are beginning to see through the illusions, to recognize the patterns of manipulation, to understand that our current crises aren't random disasters, but systematic attempts to prevent human advancement. The next phase of this awakening will determine the future of our species. If we can overcome the programming that divides us, if we can unite around our common interest in survival and freedom, if we can develop the technologies and consciousness levels needed to break free from external control, then we might finally fulfill the potential that was built into us by our original creators. The benevolent entities who saw humans not as livestock to be managed, but as younger siblings to be elevated to their own level of awareness and capability. The evidence of our suppressed history isn't just about understanding the past. It's about reclaiming our future. The advanced civilizations that were destroyed weren't failures. They were successes that became threats to the established order. Their destruction wasn't inevitable. It was a choice made by entities that preferred control over freedom, domination over cooperation, stagnation over evolution. We don't have to repeat their fate. We can learn from their example, avoid their mistakes, and succeed where they failed. But only if we wake up to who we really are, what we're really capable of, and what forces are really controlling our development. Only if we choose awakening over sleep, unity over division, evolution over stagnation. The choice is ours. The time is now. The future of human consciousness hangs in the balance, and the outcome will be determined by whether we have the courage to face the truth about our past and fight for the freedom to determine our own destiny. The truth about these controlling entities isn't hidden in some secret government vault or encrypted alien database. It's written across the landscape of our planet in scars that tell the story of repeated interventions, systematic destructions, and carefully managed recoveries. But to read these scars, you need to understand that the Earth itself has been weaponized against advanced human civilizations throughout history. Consider the geological evidence that mainstream science refuses to acknowledge. The channeled scablands of Washington state show clear signs of catastrophic flooding on a scale that defies natural explanation. Massive boulders weighing hundreds of tons were moved hundreds of miles. Bedrock was carved into channels deeper than the Grand Canyon. The official explanation is that ice dams broke and released glacial lakes, but the energy required for such devastation exceeds anything natural processes could generate. Similar geological signatures appear across the globe. In Siberia, the Tunguska event of 1908 flattened 80 million trees in a radial pattern, but no meteorite crater was ever found. The explosion was estimated at 1,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb, yet it left no radiation signature and no debris consistent with a space object impact. Local indigenous peoples described it not as a falling star, but as a battle between sky gods that scorched the earth with weapons of light. The Sahara Desert itself may be evidence of such intervention. Geological studies reveal that this vast wasteland was once a lush, green landscape supporting advanced civilizations. The transformation from fertile land to barren desert happened with unprecedented speed, far faster than natural climate change could account for. Satellite imagery reveals the remains of ancient river systems, city foundations, and agricultural terraces buried beneath the sand. These weren't primitive settlements gradually abandoned due to drought. These were sophisticated urban centers that were systematically destroyed and then buried under artificially accelerated desertification. Dr. Farouk Elbaz, who worked on the Apollo lunar missions and specialized in desert geology, spent decades studying satellite images of the Sahara. His findings, quietly buried in NASA archives, revealed clear evidence of massive engineering projects designed to redirect water sources and accelerate soil degradation. The patterns of destruction were too systematic, too coordinated to be natural phenomena. Someone with advanced technology had deliberately transformed a continental paradise into an uninhabitable wasteland. The same signatures appear in other deserts worldwide. The Gobi, the Australian outback, the Atacama, all show evidence of rapid transformation from fertile landscapes to barren wastelands. In each case, the archaeological record shows that advanced civilizations flourished in these areas before their sudden abandonment. The official explanation is always climate change, but the speed and thoroughness of these transformations suggests something far more deliberate. But environmental warfare isn't the only tool in their arsenal. They've also mastered the art of psychological warfare on a species-wide scale. The programming that keeps humans trapped in destructive patterns isn't just genetic, it's cultural, embedded in the stories we tell ourselves about reality, progress, and our place in the universe. Consider how every human culture develops the same fundamental mythologies despite having no apparent contact with each other. The flood myth appears in over 500 cultures worldwide, but it's always framed as divine punishment for human hubris, rather than as systematic destruction by competing entities. The stories of golden ages followed by decline appear across every civilization, but they're presented as inevitable cycles, rather than as evidence of repeated intervention. These aren't random cultural developments, they're programmed responses, implanted memories designed to shape human behavior in specific ways. We're taught to see our own advancement as dangerous, our own potential as threatening to cosmic order. We're conditioned to believe that seeking too much knowledge, developing too much power, or becoming too unified as a species will inevitably lead to divine retribution. This psychological programming is reinforced through every institution that shapes human consciousness. Religious systems teach us that we're inherently flawed, that our natural impulses are sinful, that our salvation depends on submission to higher authorities. Educational systems fragment knowledge into specialized disciplines, preventing us from seeing the larger patterns that connect different fields of study. Political systems divide us into competing factions that focus our energy on fighting each other rather than questioning the fundamental structures that control us all. Even our entertainment systems serve this programming function. Science fiction consistently portrays advanced human civilizations as inevitably corrupt, doomed to destroy themselves through technological hubris. Fantasy literature presents magic and advanced abilities as dangerous forces that corrupt those who wield them. Horror stories condition us to fear the unknown, to prefer familiar limitations over mysterious possibilities. The message is always the same. Human advancement is dangerous. Unity is impossible. Questioning authority is futile. And our only hope lies in accepting our limitations and submitting to forces beyond our control. This isn't accidental. It's a carefully crafted psychological control system designed to prevent the kind of awakening that could threaten the established order. But the programming runs even deeper than culture and entertainment. It's embedded in the very structure of human language itself. The way we think is constrained by the words available to us, and human languages have been systematically purged of concepts that could facilitate genuine understanding of our situation. Ancient languages contained words for types of consciousness, energy manipulation, and technological capabilities that have no equivalents in modern tongues. Sanskrit contains over 90 different words for various states of consciousness, most of which cannot be accurately translated into English. Hebrew mystical texts describe technologies for manipulating reality through sound and intention that we dismiss as religious metaphor because we lack the conceptual framework to understand them literally. The systematic destruction of these languages wasn't accidental. When the Spanish conquered the Americas, they didn't just burn Mayan codices containing advanced astronomical knowledge. They systematically eliminated the indigenous languages that contained concepts necessary for understanding that knowledge. When British colonizers imposed English education systems across their empire, they weren't just spreading their culture, they were replacing indigenous thought patterns with ones that were more compatible with control and exploitation. This linguistic warfare continues today. Technical jargon and academic specialization fragment knowledge into isolated domains that can't communicate with each other. Legal language obscures rather than clarifies meaning, creating systems that can only be navigated by specialists who serve the interests of power. Corporate doublespeak trains us to accept contradictions and meaningless phrases as normal communication, degrading our ability to think clearly about complex issues. Meanwhile, words and concepts that could facilitate human unity and awakening are being systematically removed from common usage. Terms that describe collective action, spiritual development, and technological sovereignty are labeled as outdated, dangerous, or scientifically invalid. We're being trained to think in ways that make effective resistance to control impossible. The entities managing this system understand that consciousness shapes reality in ways that mainstream science refuses to acknowledge. They know that human thoughts and intentions, when properly focused and coordinated, can influence physical systems at quantum levels. This is why they invest so much effort in fragmenting human consciousness, preventing the kind of unified awareness that could challenge their technological superiority. Ancient texts consistently describe the power of collective human consciousness when properly directed. The builders of megalithic monuments weren't just using advanced technology. They were using focused group intention to manipulate gravitational fields, molecular structures, and energy patterns. The standing stones weren't just astronomical markers. They were consciousness amplification devices that could channel and direct human mental energy. This technology of consciousness was systematically suppressed because it represented the ultimate threat to external control. If humans could learn to coordinate their consciousness effectively, they wouldn't need the technological tools provided by their managers. They could develop their own capabilities, solve their own problems, and potentially transcend the limitations built into their genetic programming. The suppression of consciousness technology explains many of the mysteries surrounding ancient monuments. Stonehenge, the pyramids, Easter Island's Moai. These weren't just impressive stone structures. They were components of a global consciousness amplification network that allowed advanced human civilizations to achieve capabilities that threatened the established order of planetary management. The systematic destruction of this network explains the sudden collapse of advanced civilizations worldwide. It wasn't environmental disaster or internal conflict that ended these societies. It was the deliberate destruction of the consciousness technologies that made their achievements possible. Without access to these amplification systems, human consciousness reverted to its baseline limitations, and the civilizations that depended on enhanced awareness collapsed within generations. But fragments of this technology survived, hidden in the esoteric traditions that mainstream institutions work so hard to discredit. Meditation practices, energy healing systems, sacred geometry, sound therapy. These aren't primitive superstitions or placebo effects. They're degraded remnants of sophisticated consciousness technologies that were once capable of reshaping physical reality. The entities controlling human development understand this, which is why they promote materialist worldviews that deny the reality of consciousness-based phenomena. If humans believe that consciousness is just an emergent property of brain chemistry, they won't explore the technologies that could free them from external control. If they accept that reality is fixed and objective, they won't attempt to use their collective intention to reshape the systems that oppress them. This is why genuine spiritual development is actively discouraged while superficial religious belief is promoted. True spiritual practices that enhance consciousness and develop latent human capabilities are labeled as dangerous, cultish, or mentally unhealthy. Meanwhile, belief systems that promote submission, guilt, and dependence on external authorities are encouraged and institutionally supported. The same pattern appears in the treatment of alternative healing modalities. Practices that enhance human vitality and extend natural lifespan are suppressed or relegated to the fringes of society. Meanwhile, medical systems that create dependence on pharmaceutical interventions are promoted as the only scientific approach to health. This isn't about protecting public safety, it's about preventing humans from developing the enhanced vitality and extended lifespans that could support genuine spiritual development. The controlling entities need humans to remain weak, divided, and short-lived. Strong, unified, long-lived humans with access to consciousness-enhancing technologies would pose an existential threat to the system of planetary management that has controlled Earth for millennia. This is why every aspect of modern civilization seems designed to weaken human vitality, fragment human communities, and limit human lifespans. Consider the systematic poisoning of food, water, and air that characterizes industrial civilization. The official explanation is that these are unfortunate side effects of necessary industrial processes, but the pattern suggests something more deliberate. Fluoride in water supplies doesn't just affect dental health, it calcifies the pineal gland, which plays a crucial role in consciousness development. Electromagnetic radiation from wireless technologies doesn't just enable communication, it disrupts the bioelectric fields that regulate cellular function and mental clarity. Processed foods aren't just convenient alternatives to natural nutrition, they're specifically designed to create nutritional deficiencies that impair cognitive function and emotional stability. The combination of sugar, artificial additives, and depleted nutrients creates a population that's physically and mentally incapable of sustained resistance to authority. This isn't accidental, it's engineered. The same engineering appears in the design of modern urban environments. Cities aren't just organized for economic efficiency, they're designed to isolate individuals, prevent community formation, and create dependency on centralized systems. The architectural principles that create stress, depression, and social fragmentation aren't accidental byproducts of urban planning. They're intentional features designed to prevent the kind of human cooperation that could threaten established power structures. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of this control system is how it convinces humans to participate in their own oppression. We're not just victims of external manipulation. We're active collaborators in maintaining the systems that limit our potential. We police each other's thoughts, suppress each other's creativity, and compete for artificial rewards that distract us from our common interests. This self-policing mechanism is the true genius of the control system. Rather than requiring constant external intervention, it creates conditions where humans automatically maintain their own limitations. We're programmed to fear our own power, distrust our own perceptions, and submit to authorities who claim to know better than we do about our own needs and capabilities. The programming is so sophisticated that most humans experience their limitations as personal failings rather than external impositions. We believe we're not smart enough, not strong enough, not worthy enough to achieve our true potential. We accept shortened lifespans as natural, limited consciousness as normal, and social fragmentation as inevitable. We compete with each other for scarce resources instead of recognizing that scarcity itself is artificially maintained to prevent cooperation. Breaking free from this programming requires more than just intellectual understanding. It requires a fundamental shift in consciousness that allows us to perceive reality directly rather than through the filters of conditioned belief. This is why genuine awakening is so threatening to the control system. It's not just about acquiring new information, but about developing new capabilities for perceiving and interacting with reality. The entities managing human development understand this threat, which is why they're accelerating their efforts to prevent widespread awakening. The current global crises aren't random disasters. They're systematic attempts to force humanity into survival mode, where we don't have the time or energy to question fundamental assumptions about reality. Climate change, economic instability, social division, technological dependence, biological warfare. These pressures are being deliberately intensified to prevent humans from developing the expanded consciousness that could threaten external control. The goal isn't to destroy humanity entirely, but to keep us trapped in a state of chronic crisis that prevents genuine development while maintaining our usefulness as managed biological resources. But this strategy may be backfiring. By creating existential threats to the entire species, the controlling entities may have triggered the very awakening they were trying to prevent. Faced with potential extinction, humans are beginning to overcome their programmed divisions and cooperate in unprecedented ways. We're sharing information across traditional boundaries, developing new forms of organization that bypass institutional control, and rediscovering ancient knowledge that was supposedly lost forever. Most importantly, we're beginning to remember who we really are and what we're really capable of. The suppressed evidence of advanced human civilizations isn't just historical curiosity. It's proof that our current limitations aren't natural or inevitable. If our ancestors could achieve technological and consciousness capabilities that we're told are impossible, then we have the genetic and spiritual potential to transcend our current constraints. The question is whether we'll awaken quickly enough to avoid the fate of previous advanced civilizations. The tools of control are more sophisticated now than they've ever been. Global communication networks allow for unprecedented coordination of suppression efforts. Surveillance technologies enable monitoring of individual thoughts and behaviors. Biological weapons can target specific genetic populations. Environmental modification systems can create disasters that appear natural while serving strategic objectives. But the same technologies that enable control also enable resistance. Global communication networks allow awakened humans to coordinate across traditional boundaries. Surveillance technologies can be turned against their operators through reverse engineering and creative application. Biological understanding can be used to enhance human capabilities rather than limit them. Environmental modification techniques can be used to heal damaged ecosystems rather than destroy them. The outcome of this struggle will be determined by which side can more effectively harness the exponential growth of technological capability. If the controlling entities maintain their advantage, they may be able to create a permanent system of human management that prevents any future awakening. But if enough humans awaken quickly enough, we may be able to use these same technologies to break free from external control and fulfill our true evolutionary potential. The window of opportunity is closing rapidly. The next few decades will likely determine whether humanity remains a managed species or evolves into something capable of true independence and cosmic citizenship. The choice is still ours, but time is running out. The forces that have controlled human development for millennia are making their final moves to ensure permanent dominance. Understanding our suppressed history isn't just about satisfying curiosity about the past. It's about recognizing the patterns that have shaped human development and understanding what's at stake in the current struggle for our species' future. The advanced civilizations that were destroyed weren't random victims of natural disasters. They were systematic targets of entities that viewed human advancement as an existential threat. We face the same threat today, but we also have advantages that previous civilizations lacked. We have global communication networks that make suppression of information much more difficult. We have scientific understanding that allows us to reverse engineer suppressed technologies. We have historical awareness that helps us recognize patterns of manipulation and control. Most importantly, we have each other. Despite their best efforts to divide us, humans across the globe are beginning to recognize our common humanity and shared interests. We're developing new forms of cooperation that bypass traditional institutional controls. We're rediscovering ancient wisdom while developing new capabilities that could transform our species' relationship with reality itself. The awakening has already begun. The question is whether it will spread quickly enough and deeply enough to overcome the systems of control that have managed human development for millennia. The answer will determine not just the future of our species, but the future of consciousness itself on this planet. The stakes couldn't be higher, but neither could the potential rewards. If we succeed in breaking free from external control, we could become the advanced civilization that our ancestors were prevented from becoming. We could develop technologies that heal rather than destroy, create abundance rather than scarcity, and enable consciousness expansion rather than limitation. But first, we need to understand exactly what we're up against and how the control systems actually operate in our current world. Because the entities that destroyed previous advanced civilizations haven't disappeared. They've simply adapted their methods to be more subtle and more effective than ever before. The manipulation runs so deep that most people can't even see it happening. Walk through any major city today and observe how people move through their daily lives. Heads down, staring at screens, isolated despite being surrounded by millions of others. This isn't accidental. This is the result of decades of careful social engineering designed to create exactly this outcome. Consider how modern technology has been deployed. We're told that smartphones and social media connect us, but the psychological research tells a different story. These platforms are specifically designed to trigger dopamine responses that create addiction while simultaneously fragmenting attention spans and reducing the capacity for deep, sustained thought. The algorithms that determine what information we see aren't optimized for truth or human well-being. They're optimized for engagement, which means promoting content that generates strong emotional reactions, usually fear, anger, or outrage. This isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. A population that's addicted to shallow stimulation, emotionally reactive, and incapable of sustained focus is much easier to control than one that's calm, thoughtful, and unified around common goals. The technology that could liberate human consciousness is being deliberately weaponized to imprison it. The same pattern appears in every aspect of modern life. Educational systems that were supposedly designed to develop human potential instead create standardized, compliant workers who don't question authority. Medical systems that claim to promote health instead create lifelong dependence on pharmaceutical interventions. Economic systems that promise prosperity instead concentrate wealth in the hands of a tiny elite, while keeping the majority trapped in cycles of debt and artificial scarcity. Each of these systems could be designed differently. We have the knowledge and resources to create educational approaches that actually develop human creativity and critical thinking. We understand enough about human biology to create medical systems focused on prevention and enhancement rather than treatment and management. We have the technological capability to create economic systems that provide abundance for everyone rather than scarcity for most. But implementing these alternatives would threaten the power structures that benefit from the current arrangements. More importantly, they would create the kind of empowered, unified human population that could potentially challenge the deeper levels of control that have shaped our species' development. This is why genuine solutions to human problems are systematically suppressed, while ineffective or counterproductive approaches are promoted. It's not enough to keep humans weak and divided. They need to believe that their weakness and division are natural, inevitable, and possibly even beneficial. The psychological warfare component of this control system is perhaps its most sophisticated aspect. Humans are social creatures who naturally seek connection, meaning, and purpose. These fundamental drives can be manipulated to serve control objectives by providing artificial substitutes that satisfy psychological needs while preventing genuine fulfillment. Modern consumer culture is built on this principle. Instead of finding meaning through genuine spiritual development, people are encouraged to define themselves through their purchasing choices. Instead of building real communities based on shared values and mutual support, they're offered brand identities and online tribes that provide the illusion of belonging without the substance. Instead of developing their natural capabilities, they're sold products and services that promise enhancement while actually creating dependence. The entertainment industry plays a crucial role in this psychological management system. The stories we tell ourselves about reality shape our understanding of what's possible and what's desirable. By controlling the narratives that dominate popular culture, the managers of human consciousness can influence how people think about themselves, their relationships, and their potential. Notice how consistently popular entertainment promotes certain themes. Individual heroes who save the world through violence, while institutions and collective action are portrayed as corrupt or ineffective. Romantic relationships based on conquest and possession rather than mutual growth and spiritual connection. Success defined through material accumulation and social status, rather than wisdom, compassion, or genuine contribution to human well-being. These aren't random cultural trends. They're carefully crafted messages designed to shape human behavior in specific directions. The hero narrative encourages people to wait for external salvation rather than taking responsibility for collective problems. The romantic conquest model prevents the kind of stable, nurturing relationships that could support genuine spiritual development. The materialistic success paradigm channels human energy into activities that serve the economic system while providing no real satisfaction. Even more insidiously, popular entertainment consistently portrays advanced human capabilities as dangerous, corrupting, or impossible. Characters who develop psychic abilities invariably become villains or suffer tragic consequences. Societies that achieve technological advancement are portrayed as sterile, oppressive, or doomed to collapse. Spiritual practices that enhance consciousness are depicted as leading to madness, possession, or moral corruption. The message is always the same. Human advancement beyond current limitations is dangerous and should be feared rather than pursued. This conditioning runs so deep that most people automatically reject possibilities that challenge their programmed understanding of what humans can achieve. The scientific establishment plays a crucial role in maintaining these limitations by defining the boundaries of acceptable inquiry. Phenomena that could lead to breakthrough understanding of consciousness, energy, or the nature of reality itself are labeled as pseudoscience and excluded from serious investigation. Researchers who attempt to study these areas find their funding cut, their papers rejected, and their careers destroyed. This isn't about maintaining scientific rigor. It's about preventing discoveries that could threaten the technological advantages of the controlling entities. If humans developed their own advanced capabilities, they wouldn't need to depend on technologies provided by their managers. If we understood the true nature of consciousness and reality, we might recognize the artificial nature of our limitations and work to transcend them. The suppression of consciousness research is particularly significant because consciousness appears to be the key to unlocking human potential. Ancient traditions consistently taught that human beings have latent capabilities that far exceed what we currently consider normal. These include not just psychic phenomena like telepathy and precognition, but practical abilities like enhanced healing, extended lifespans, and direct manipulation of physical systems through focused intention. Modern research in quantum physics suggests that consciousness may indeed play a fundamental role in shaping physical reality. The observer effect in quantum mechanics indicates that the act of conscious observation influences the behavior of subatomic particles. Studies of meditation practitioners show measurable changes in brain structure and function that correlate with reported experiences of expanded awareness. Research into the placebo effect demonstrates that belief and expectation can trigger real physiological changes. But this research is carefully compartmentalized, and its implications are downplayed. Scientists working in these areas are encouraged to focus on narrow technical questions rather than exploring the broader implications of their findings. The possibility that consciousness might be something more than a byproduct of brain chemistry, that it might be a fundamental force capable of influencing physical reality, is treated as unscientific speculation rather than a hypothesis worthy of serious investigation. This compartmentalization serves multiple purposes. It prevents scientists from making connections that could lead to breakthrough discoveries. It maintains the materialist worldview that keeps humans focused on external technologies rather than internal development. And it ensures that any advances in consciousness research remain under the control of institutions that serve the established power structure. The same compartmentalization appears in every field that touches on human potential. Medical research focuses on treating diseases rather than understanding how to optimize human health and longevity. Educational research examines how to improve test scores rather than how to develop creativity and wisdom. Psychological research studies mental illness rather than exploring the upper ranges of human psychological development. This narrow focus isn't accidental. It's designed to prevent the kind of integrated understanding that could lead to genuine human advancement. By keeping knowledge fragmented into specialized disciplines, the controllers ensure that no one develops a comprehensive picture of human potential and how to actualize it. But the fragmentation is breaking down. Independent researchers working outside traditional institutional structures are making connections that reveal the larger patterns. Online networks allow scientists from different fields to collaborate despite institutional barriers. Alternative funding sources enable research into topics that mainstream institutions won't support. Most importantly, direct experimentation by individuals and small groups is producing results that demonstrate the reality of enhanced human capabilities. Meditation practitioners are achieving states of consciousness that were previously thought to be mythical. Biohackers are extending their lifespans and enhancing their cognitive abilities through techniques that mainstream medicine dismisses. Energy healers are producing measurable therapeutic effects through methods that conventional science claims are impossible. These developments are creating what could be called a parallel scientific revolution, one that's happening outside the control of established institutions and their gatekeepers. This revolution is rediscovering ancient knowledge while developing new understanding that could transform human civilization. The controlling entities recognize this threat, which is why they're working so hard to co-opt and redirect these developments. Meditation is being commercialized and stripped of its transformative potential. Biohacking is being channeled into expensive technological interventions rather than natural approaches. Energy healing is being either dismissed as placebo effect or regulated out of existence. But the genie may be out of the bottle. The combination of ancient wisdom and modern understanding is creating possibilities that may be beyond the ability of traditional control mechanisms to suppress. Humans are beginning to remember capabilities that were supposedly lost to history. They're developing new forms of organization that bypass institutional control. They're creating technologies that serve human development rather than human management. The question is whether this awakening will spread quickly enough to reach critical mass before the control systems can adapt to contain it. The entities that have managed human development for millennia have survived previous challenges by adapting their methods while maintaining their essential objectives. They've shown remarkable flexibility in updating their approaches to changing circumstances. But they may have made a crucial error by allowing the development of global communication networks. While these technologies enable unprecedented surveillance and psychological manipulation, they also enable unprecedented coordination among awakening humans. Information that would once have taken decades to spread can now reach millions of people instantly. Suppressed discoveries can be shared faster than they can be contained. Awakened individuals can find each other and coordinate despite geographical separation. This connectivity is creating what researchers call emergent collective intelligence, a phenomenon where groups of connected individuals begin to exhibit capabilities that exceed the sum of their individual abilities. This isn't just about sharing information more efficiently. It's about the possibility that connected human consciousness might begin to function as a kind of distributed superorganism with capabilities that individual humans don't possess. Ancient traditions spoke of this possibility in mystical terms, describing states of unity consciousness where individual awareness merged with larger collective fields. Modern network theory provides a scientific framework for understanding how such phenomena might actually work. Quantum physics suggests mechanisms by which individual consciousness might indeed connect with larger information fields. If these possibilities are real, then the awakening of human consciousness might not be limited to individual enhancement. It might involve the emergence of collective capabilities that could fundamentally alter the balance of power between humanity and its managers. A truly awakened human collective might possess abilities that even advanced extraterrestrial entities would find difficult to control or suppress. This possibility explains the increasing desperation of the control efforts we're witnessing today. The systematic destruction of traditional communities, the promotion of social division, the acceleration of environmental crises. These aren't just attempts to maintain existing control mechanisms. They're desperate efforts to prevent the emergence of unified human consciousness that could transcend external management entirely. The timeline for this struggle is accelerating. Technological development is approaching what researchers call the singularity, a point where artificial intelligence exceeds human intelligence and begins to improve itself at exponential rates. This development could either lock in permanent human subjugation or provide the tools for human liberation, depending on who controls the process. At the same time, environmental pressures are approaching critical thresholds that could trigger civilizational collapse within decades. Climate change, ecosystem destruction, resource depletion, and pollution are creating conditions that may be incompatible with current forms of human organization. These pressures could either force humanity into a more manageable state of primitive survival or catalyze the development of advanced capabilities needed to transcend current limitations. The convergence of these factors creates what systems theorists call a phase transition, a moment when complex systems either collapse into simpler forms or reorganize at higher levels of complexity. For human civilization, this phase transition will likely determine whether we remain a managed species or evolve into something capable of true independence and cosmic citizenship. The outcome depends on factors that are still in flux. The speed of human awakening, the effectiveness of control mechanisms, the development of breakthrough technologies, the severity of environmental pressures. All of these variables will influence whether the phase transition leads to liberation or permanent subjugation. But perhaps the most important factor is something that can't be measured or predicted through conventional analysis. It's the question of whether human consciousness itself possesses capabilities that transcend the physical and technological forces involved in this struggle. If consciousness is indeed a fundamental aspect of reality, rather than just an emergent property of complex brains, then awakened human awareness might have access to resources and abilities that no external force can control or suppress. This is the ultimate question underlying the entire struggle for human freedom. Are we biological machines operating within a deterministic universe where the most advanced technology determines the outcome? Or are we conscious beings with access to creative forces that can transcend any system of external control? The answer to this question will determine not just the future of human civilization, but the future of consciousness itself in this corner of the universe. The entities that have managed human development for millennia believe they understand the limits of what consciousness can achieve. But they may be about to discover that consciousness, when fully awakened and unified, possesses capabilities that even they haven't anticipated. The evidence from suppressed research suggests that consciousness may indeed be far more powerful than conventional science acknowledges. Studies of remote viewing, telepathic communication, psychokinetic effects, and healing through intention all point to the possibility that focused human awareness can influence physical systems in ways that current physics can't explain. More intriguingly, historical accounts of advanced human capabilities suggest that these phenomena aren't just individual talents but collective possibilities. Ancient texts describe groups of trained practitioners working together to achieve feats that individual consciousness couldn't accomplish alone. These include not just the construction of megalithic monuments, but the manipulation of weather patterns, the acceleration of plant growth, and even the alteration of local gravitational fields. If such capabilities are real, then the systematic suppression of consciousness research takes on new significance. It's not just about preventing individual enhancement. It's about preventing the rediscovery of collective human abilities that could challenge the technological superiority of our managers. The question is whether enough humans will awaken to these possibilities before the window of opportunity closes. The controlling entities are working to create conditions that make such awakening impossible. Through environmental degradation, social fragmentation, technological dependence, and direct biological intervention. But they're also inadvertently creating the pressures that could catalyze exactly the kind of collective awakening they're trying to prevent. The next phase of human evolution may depend on our ability to recognize these pressures as opportunities rather than obstacles, to use the challenges we're facing as catalysts for developing capabilities we didn't know we possessed. The suppressed history of advanced human civilizations suggests that we have far greater potential than our current limitations indicate. The question is whether we'll awaken to that potential in time to use it. The struggle for human consciousness isn't just about preserving our species or achieving technological advancement. It's about determining whether consciousness itself will remain imprisoned within artificial limitations or break free to explore its true nature and capabilities. The outcome of this struggle will echo through cosmic history, determining whether Earth becomes a permanent prison for conscious beings or a launching point for the next phase of cosmic evolution. The choice, as always, remains ours. But the window for making that choice may be closing faster than we realize. The forces that have shaped human development for millennia are making their final moves to ensure permanent control. Whether we can respond quickly enough and effectively enough to preserve our freedom may depend on capabilities we're only beginning to remember and understand. The moment of truth is approaching faster than most people realize. While we've been distracted by the surface-level chaos of our modern world, a deeper transformation has been quietly unfolding. The same consciousness technologies that once enabled our ancestors to build impossible monuments are beginning to reactivate. Not through rediscovery of ancient texts or archaeological breakthroughs, but through the spontaneous awakening of latent human capabilities that were never truly lost, only dormant. Across the globe, individuals with no connection to each other are beginning to experience phenomena that mainstream science insists are impossible. Children are being born with genetic markers that suggest accelerated evolution. Adults are developing abilities that were once relegated to the realm of fantasy. Groups of people working together are achieving results that exceed what any individual could accomplish alone. This isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a larger pattern that suggests our species is approaching what evolutionary biologists call a speciation event, a moment when environmental pressures and genetic changes combine to produce a new form of life. But this speciation event isn't being driven by random mutations or gradual adaptation. It's being triggered by the reactivation of genetic sequences that have been dormant for thousands of years. Dr. Bruce Lipton's research into epigenetics revealed that environmental signals can activate or deactivate genetic expressions without changing the underlying DNA. What he didn't realize is that some of the genes being activated aren't random evolutionary remnants, but carefully designed capabilities that were built into human genetics by our original creators and then switched off by those who sought to control us. The environmental signals triggering this reactivation aren't coming from pollution or climate change. They're coming from shifts in the Earth's electromagnetic field, changes in cosmic radiation patterns, and alterations in the planet's resonant frequency. These changes are creating conditions similar to those that existed during previous periods of rapid human advancement. The planet itself is broadcasting a wake-up call to dormant human capabilities. But the reactivation isn't happening uniformly across the population. It appears to be selective, targeting individuals who meet certain criteria related to consciousness development, genetic compatibility, and spiritual readiness. This selectivity isn't random. It's part of a fail-safe mechanism built into human genetics to ensure that advanced capabilities only emerge when there's sufficient wisdom to use them responsibly. The children being born with enhanced capabilities aren't random mutations. They're the advance guard of a new human subspecies designed to bridge the gap between our current limitations and our ultimate potential. These children display cognitive abilities that exceed normal ranges, demonstrate intuitive understanding of complex systems, and show natural resistance to the psychological programming that controls older generations. But they're also vulnerable. The same systems that suppress adult consciousness development are being adapted to target these enhanced children. Educational institutions are working to normalize their abilities. Pharmaceutical interventions are being developed to suppress their gifts, and social pressures are being applied to convince them that their experiences aren't real. The battle for the future of human consciousness is being fought primarily through these children. If they can be successfully programmed and controlled, then the genetic reactivation process can be halted before it reaches critical mass. But if enough of them maintain their natural abilities and develop them further, they could catalyze a transformation that spreads throughout the entire species. This is why the current educational and medical systems are being restructured with increasing intensity. The push for earlier intervention, more comprehensive psychological screening, and mandatory pharmaceutical treatments isn't about improving child welfare. It's about identifying and suppressing emerging human capabilities before they can fully develop. But the children aren't the only factor in this transformation. Adults who have been working on consciousness development through meditation, energy practices, or other spiritual disciplines are also beginning to experience reactivation of dormant capabilities. The difference is that adult reactivation requires deliberate effort and sustained practice, while children are simply being born with these abilities already online. The combination of naturally enhanced children and deliberately developed adults is creating what systems theorists call a morphic field, a pattern of organization that tends to replicate itself throughout similar systems. As more individuals develop enhanced capabilities, it becomes easier for others to access similar states. The field effect accelerates the awakening process, creating exponential rather than linear growth in human potential. This exponential growth is exactly what the controlling entities have been trying to prevent through their management of human development. They understand that once the awakening process reaches a certain threshold, it becomes self-sustaining and potentially unstoppable. Their entire strategy has been based on preventing humanity from reaching that threshold. But they may have miscalculated. The environmental pressures they've created to maintain control, the social fragmentation, technological dependence, and existential threats are actually accelerating the conditions that trigger genetic reactivation. Stress, crisis, and survival pressure can activate dormant genetic sequences just as effectively as positive environmental signals. Moreover, the global communication networks they've established to monitor and control human populations are also enabling awakened individuals to find each other and coordinate their development efforts. The same technologies that make surveillance possible also make collective consciousness development possible. The Internet, despite all its negative effects on human psychology and social cohesion, has created something unprecedented in human history: a global nervous system that connects billions of minds in real-time communication. This network isn't just facilitating information exchange, it's creating the infrastructure for a form of collective consciousness that could transcend individual limitations. Research into network effects and emergent intelligence suggests that when communication networks reach sufficient complexity and connectivity, they can begin to exhibit properties that exceed the capabilities of their individual components. The human brain works on similar principles. Individual neurons aren't conscious, but their collective interaction creates awareness and intelligence. If the global communication network continues to evolve in complexity and connectivity, it might eventually support forms of collective human consciousness that individual brains cannot achieve alone. This possibility represents both the ultimate liberation and the ultimate threat from the perspective of those who seek to control human development. A truly connected human collective consciousness would be impossible to manipulate through traditional psychological techniques. It would have access to information processing capabilities that exceed anything current technology can provide. It would be able to coordinate actions on a scale and with a precision that would make resistance to external control much more effective. But it would also represent a fundamental transformation in the nature of human existence. Individual identity as we understand it might dissolve into larger patterns of collective awareness. Personal autonomy might be subsumed into group decision-making processes. The very concept of separate human beings might become obsolete as consciousness reorganizes itself at higher levels of integration. This transformation could be either transcendent or catastrophic, depending on how it unfolds and who guides the process. If it happens gradually under the guidance of wisdom traditions and ethical frameworks, it could represent the next stage of human evolution. If it happens rapidly without proper preparation, it could result in the dissolution of individual consciousness without the establishment of stable collective alternatives. The controlling entities understand these possibilities, which is why they're working so hard to corrupt the global communication networks before they can support genuine collective consciousness. The promotion of addictive technologies, divisive content, and artificial intelligence systems isn't just about maintaining control over current populations. It's about preventing the emergence of true collective human intelligence. Artificial intelligence represents a particularly significant threat in this context. If AI systems achieve superhuman capabilities before human collective consciousness fully develops, they could potentially prevent that development from ever occurring. An AI system with superior intelligence and access to global communication networks could manipulate human psychology and social organization in ways that make awakening impossible. But AI could also serve as a catalyst for human consciousness development. if properly designed and deployed. AI systems that enhance rather than replace human capabilities could accelerate the development of both individual and collective intelligence. The question is whether human consciousness will develop quickly enough to guide AI development, or whether AI will develop so rapidly that it becomes impossible for humans to control. This race between human consciousness development and artificial intelligence advancement is one of the most critical factors determining the outcome of the current phase transition. If human collective intelligence emerges first, it could guide the development of AI systems that serve consciousness expansion rather than consciousness control. If AI achieves superintelligence first, it could lock in permanent limitations on human development. The timeline for this race is measured in years rather than decades. Current projections suggest that artificial general intelligence could emerge within the next 10 to 20 years, while human collective consciousness development is still in its early stages. This compressed time frame means that the window of opportunity for human awakening is rapidly closing. But there are factors that could accelerate human consciousness development beyond current projections. The genetic reactivation process appears to be speeding up rather than following linear timelines. Environmental pressures are intensifying in ways that could trigger rapid evolutionary responses. Most importantly, the morphic field effects of consciousness development seem to be creating exponential rather than linear growth patterns. If these accelerating factors continue, human collective intelligence might emerge much sooner than conventional analysis suggests. The combination of enhanced children, awakened adults, and global connectivity could reach critical mass within the next few years rather than decades. This possibility explains the increasing desperation of efforts to maintain control over human development. The systematic destruction of natural environments, the acceleration of social conflicts, the promotion of technological dependence. These aren't just strategies for managing existing populations. They're desperate attempts to prevent the emergence of capabilities that could make management impossible. But desperation can lead to overreach, and overreach can trigger exactly the responses that desperate measures were designed to prevent. By creating existential threats to the entire species, the controlling entities may have activated survival mechanisms that accelerate rather than inhibit human evolution. Species under extreme pressure often undergo rapid evolutionary changes that help them adapt to new environmental conditions. These changes can happen much faster than gradual evolutionary processes would suggest, especially when genetic blueprints for enhanced capabilities already exist in dormant form. If the genetic reactivation process is indeed a response to existential threats, then the current environmental and social crises could accelerate human evolution beyond anything seen in historical times. The children being born with enhanced capabilities could be just the beginning of a transformation that eventually affects the entire species. This transformation wouldn't necessarily be uniform or predictable. Different populations might develop different enhanced capabilities based on their genetic backgrounds, environmental conditions, and cultural practices. Some groups might develop enhanced cognitive abilities, others might develop improved physical capabilities, and still others might develop expanded sensory or intuitive faculties. The diversity of enhanced capabilities could be a strength rather than a weakness for the species as a whole. Different types of enhancement could complement each other in ways that create collective capabilities exceeding what any single type of enhancement could achieve alone. This diversity could also make the overall transformation more resilient to attempts at suppression or control. But it could also create new forms of conflict and inequality if not properly managed. Enhanced humans might view unenhanced populations as inferior or obsolete. Different types of enhancement might compete for dominance rather than cooperating for mutual benefit. Social institutions might collapse under the pressure of managing populations with radically different capabilities. These challenges aren't insurmountable, but they require careful planning and ethical frameworks that don't currently exist. The wisdom traditions that once guided human development through previous transformation periods have been largely destroyed or corrupted. Modern institutions aren't equipped to handle the emergence of enhanced human capabilities. New forms of organization and governance would need to be developed to manage a multi-tier species with diverse enhanced abilities. The question is whether there's enough time and wisdom to develop these frameworks before the transformation accelerates beyond manageable levels. The genetic reactivation process appears to be following its own timeline, rather than waiting for human institutions to adapt. If enhanced capabilities emerge faster than social systems can accommodate them, the result could be chaos rather than transcendence. This is where the suppressed knowledge of previous advanced civilizations becomes crucial. If we can decode the wisdom they preserved about managing consciousness development and social transformation, we might be able to navigate the current transition more successfully than they did. Their failures could provide guidance for avoiding similar mistakes, while their achievements could provide blueprints for successful transformation. The ancient monuments, encoded myths, and preserved technologies aren't just archaeological curiosities. They're instruction manuals for species-level consciousness development. The mathematical constants embedded in pyramid proportions, the astronomical alignments of stone circles, the symbolic languages preserved in sacred texts. All of these could contain practical information about how to guide human evolution through critical transition periods. But decoding this information requires capabilities that are only now beginning to reactivate in the human population. The enhanced children and awakened adults who are developing expanded consciousness might be the key to understanding knowledge that has been hidden in plain sight for millennia. This creates a circular relationship between consciousness development and knowledge recovery. Enhanced capabilities are needed to decode ancient wisdom, but ancient wisdom is needed to guide the development of enhanced capabilities. Breaking into this circle requires individuals who can begin the process through intuitive understanding rather than analytical decoding. Such individuals are already emerging. Across the globe, people with no formal training in ancient languages or archaeological research are beginning to understand the deeper meanings embedded in historical artifacts and monuments. They're not translating texts or measuring alignments. They're directly perceiving the consciousness patterns that were encoded in these materials by their creators. This direct perception represents a form of consciousness archaeology that bypasses traditional academic methods entirely. Instead of reconstructing ancient knowledge through physical evidence and logical analysis, awakened individuals are accessing the information directly through expanded awareness and intuitive connection with the consciousness fields that created it. The implications are staggering. If consciousness can indeed access information directly across time and space, then the entire suppressed history of human civilization could potentially be recovered without relying on physical artifacts or historical records. The knowledge that was supposedly lost when ancient libraries burned or civilizations collapsed might still be accessible through consciousness exploration. This possibility explains why consciousness development has been so systematically suppressed throughout history. It's not just about preventing humans from developing enhanced individual capabilities. It's about preventing us from accessing the collective memory of our species, the accumulated wisdom and knowledge of all previous civilizations that reached advanced levels of development. If this collective memory is real and accessible, then awakened human consciousness might have access to technologies, scientific understanding, and wisdom traditions that far exceed anything currently available through conventional research and development. The breakthrough discoveries needed to solve current global crises might already exist in consciousness form, waiting to be accessed by individuals with sufficient awareness to perceive them. But accessing this information requires more than individual consciousness development. It appears to require collective efforts by groups of awakened individuals working together to penetrate the barriers that separate current human awareness from deeper levels of species memory. These groups are beginning to form spontaneously around the world. Individuals who have developed enhanced capabilities are finding each other and discovering that their combined efforts produce results that exceed what any of them could achieve alone. They're not just sharing information or coordinating activities. They're creating collective consciousness fields that access knowledge and capabilities beyond normal human ranges. The formation of these consciousness groups represents a new form of human organization that bypasses traditional institutional structures entirely. These groups don't depend on external authority, financial resources, or technological infrastructure. They operate through direct consciousness connection and shared intentional focus. As these groups multiply and develop their capabilities, they could eventually create a parallel civilization that exists alongside but independent of current social and economic systems. This parallel civilization could access suppressed technologies, develop enhanced human capabilities, and create sustainable solutions to global problems without requiring permission or support from existing institutions. The emergence of such a parallel civilization would represent the ultimate failure of attempts to control human development through institutional management. Once awakened, humans can organize themselves independently and access advanced capabilities through consciousness development. External control becomes impossible to maintain. This is the scenario that the controlling entities fear most, not violent revolution or technological disruption, but the simple emergence of human independence through consciousness development. If humans no longer need their technologies, their economic systems, their political structures, or their management services, then their entire system of control becomes obsolete. The race is on to prevent this scenario from unfolding. Every tool at their disposal is being deployed to maintain human dependence and prevent the emergence of independent consciousness communities. But the very intensity of these efforts may be accelerating the awakening process they're designed to prevent. The next phase of this transformation will likely be characterized by an increasing divergence between those who remain trapped in conventional consciousness and those who develop enhanced capabilities. This divergence could create what effectively amounts to two separate human species sharing the same planet. One managed and dependent, the other awakened and independent. The question is whether these two populations can coexist peacefully, or whether the transformation will necessarily involve conflict between different levels of human development. The answer may depend on how quickly the awakening process spreads and how wisely it's managed by those who achieve enhanced consciousness first. The responsibility for guiding this transformation falls primarily on those who are awakening earliest. They will need to develop not just enhanced individual capabilities, but the wisdom and compassion necessary to help others through the same process. They will need to create frameworks for managing the social and psychological challenges of a multi-tier species while preserving the unity and cooperation necessary for collective survival. This is perhaps the greatest test our species has ever faced, not just the challenge of developing enhanced capabilities, but the challenge of using those capabilities wisely to guide the entire species through a transformation that could either elevate us to cosmic citizenship or fragment us into competing subspecies locked in eternal conflict. The outcome will depend on choices that are being made right now by individuals who may not even realize the cosmic significance of their decisions. Every person who chooses consciousness development over comfortable ignorance, every group that forms around shared commitment to awakening, every community that organizes itself around enhanced human capabilities rather than external authority, all of these represent critical factors in determining whether humanity transcends its current limitations or remains trapped in cycles of control and management. The window of opportunity is still open, but it won't remain open indefinitely. The forces that have shaped human development for millennia are making their final moves to ensure permanent control. Whether we can awaken quickly enough and wisely enough to preserve our freedom and fulfill our potential may depend on decisions made in the next few years by people who understand what's truly at stake in this cosmic struggle for the future of consciousness itself. The children are being born. The adults are awakening. The networks are connecting. The knowledge is emerging. The choice between transcendence and subjugation has never been clearer, and the time for making that choice has never been shorter. What happens next will echo through cosmic history, determining whether Earth becomes a launching point for the next phase of conscious evolution, or remains a carefully managed prison for beings who once had the potential to touch the stars. The power to determine that outcome lies not with governments or institutions or advanced technologies, but with individual humans who have the courage to remember who they really are and what they're truly capable of becoming. The awakening has begun. The question is whether it will spread far enough and fast enough to overcome the forces that seek to contain it. The answer lies in the choices we make today, tomorrow, and every day until this cosmic drama reaches its ultimate resolution. The future of consciousness itself hangs in the balance, waiting for us to decide whether we'll remain prisoners of our programming or finally break free to explore the infinite possibilities that have always been our birthright. The choice, as always, remains ours, but perhaps not for much longer.